Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on Nozomi Networks, Mastering OT Security, Unveiling Nozomi Networks, Pioneering Leadership in Operational Technology. Thank you again for spending time with us this afternoon. You could be doing a plethora of whole other things, especially in security. But I'm Nasreen Shams, the Assistant Vice President of Business Development, and we have a great presentation lined up for you here today. Move to the next slide. So the agenda for today is we are going to introduce a special guest from Nozomi who's been working very carefully with us here over the past few months to further educate the team on the nuances of OT security. We'll go into a live demo, and also that we will talk about how Stratagem as a managed security service partner can enhance the operational technology and give you a quicker ROI on the investments you're making with Nozomi and how that all comes together. And we'll close out with a Q&A. So should you have any questions throughout the entire duration of the presentation, please throw it into the chat there, and we will address them at the very end. So OT in the modern world, it is of course our lifeblood. The electricity, the water, the transportation, they're not just modern day conveniences, they're really our lifelines, and they connect us to the greater economy. They really drive what we do on a daily basis. Now, imagine these lifelines being under constant threat and constant attack. This could contribute to a disruption, dismantling, or destroying some of the critical infrastructure that really leads to the orchestration of our entire economy. So Nozomi Networks is our chosen partner here at Stratagem in OT security. We've orchestrated multiple managed service offerings with a lot of critical infrastructure in Toronto and outside of that as well. And together we'll walk through today hand in hand how we can join hands with you, your teams, to be able to give you enhanced visibility into OT security. And as everybody knows, one of the recent trends and future ongoing trends is going to be disruption in critical infrastructure. It is tantamount, if not more pervasive than the effects of ransomware, right? So when you disrupt critical infrastructure, you're disrupting an entire economy. And as we saw, we are now in a post-colonial pipeline world and the implications it's had globally. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce a key speaker from Nozomi Networks today. You go to the next slide. So Jim Deeks has been gracious enough to donate his time to us. He's a cyber journalist in the industry for 17 years, worked across multiple United States Departments of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and commercial programs and projects in both IT and OT space. He's currently a staff sales engineer for Nozomi Networks and a leader in providing specialized security solutions for business, critical OT, and IoT environments. So with that being said, we have a great presentation here. Jim, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'll be back at the end.
All right, great. Thanks, Nasreen. Welcome, everyone. Happy to be here today and partner with Stratagem to let you guys in. We're going to talk a little bit about OT and IoT security, what OT and IoT are, and then how to secure those in your environment using Nozomi Networks. So we're going to start with what they are, some challenges and trends with securing them, how specifically to do that with Nozomi Networks, and then jump into a brief demo before we close out. There's some additional slides in the deck that will get sent out for folks if you'd like to review those, that talks a little bit more about the platform and some of the market validation that Nozomi's received. So what are OT and IoT? To start on the OT side, what and where is operational technology found, right? So you may hear several terms, operational technology, industrial control systems, or ICS, SCADA. They're really all around us and are critical to both the community and the economy. You heard Nasreen talk about some of the lifeblood of our economy and our daily world: oil and gas, our power, transportation, things like water treatment. Also manufacturing, airports. So basically anywhere you look, you're going to find OT, and more, the lines are being blurred between what is OT, what is IoT, what is IT. So we're going to dive into that just a bit here. So to start between IT and OT, so some key differences between these systems. On the IT side, you've got more of your standard IT assets, laptops, desktops, servers, things like that. Things that are typically replaced, maybe every few years or so. So they're typically more recent pieces of technology. On the OT side, these things can be deployed for 20 plus years. I was recently at a customer site. They were telling me about a piece of equipment they had that the vendor is no longer even a vendor. So they were trying to figure out a game plan if they would ever have to replace this piece of equipment, trying to find something comparable on the market. The people that had bought it and installed it, the vendor's no longer around. The people at that company no longer worked there. So you've just got this 20 plus old piece of equipment that's still doing its job, but what happens if that thing goes down? On the protocol side, pretty standard protocols on the IT side. There's a few of them that generally most devices are using. On the OT side, very large protocol set, often proprietary, so not open protocols that everybody understands how they work. Nuances based on the vendors, very tightly controlled by the vendors. As a big part of the reason that OT security has kind of taken so long to evolve is that it used to be security by obscurity. Nobody knew how these things worked. Nobody knew what the protocols were saying. So it was kind of like, okay, you can't attack it if you don't understand it. Well, that's certainly changed. Security, most IT assets, you've got some level of security built in, and it can at least be patched along the way. On the OT side, these are really stripped down devices with a high focus on performance and availability, and really not much, if any, security built in. Almost all of them use open protocols. We're not using encryption. They're built for a very specific purpose. So on the networking side, they can't have latency. They're very deterministic. So they expect a certain set of inputs, and based on those, you're going to get a certain set of outputs. So, they're not capable of withstanding protocols and commands that they typically don't understand. That can have disastrous results. On the connectivity side, IT, we're typically wireless. We're typically plugging in an Ethernet jack. On the OT side, tons of different interface options, both serial-based, network-based, all different kinds. So again, you've got just this combination of simple devices, but with a lot of complexity about how they connect and interoperate with the world and the devices around them. On the availability side, even if these things on the OT side can be patched, they're hardly ever able to be taken down. There's usually very tightly controlled downtime windows, and often they don't want to be patched, or the operators don't want to patch them because they don't want it to be rebooted. They don't want it to affect the functionality. If they apply a patch and all of a sudden that system can't do what it does anymore, that's a big problem. So they're typically on 24/7 with no or very little scheduled downtime. And probably the biggest difference that I like to call out between IT and OT. So if an IT system goes down, it's inconvenient. There may be significant financial loss. That certainly is more than an inconvenience. But on the OT side, we're talking about the potential impact to or even loss of human life. So I say an OT device is anything where if something goes wrong with it, somebody could get seriously hurt. So still, there are potential financial losses if a facility goes down, but we're talking about an impact to human life here on the OT side. So just as a glimpse, one of these types of devices, here's an industrial controller where it may accept digital inputs, either on, off, 1, 0, or analog, where it's something like a temperature or pressure level, and then it's producing an output, maybe a digital output that is turning something off or on, or an analog output where it's maybe adjusting a pump speed or how open a valve is. And so as we jump into now IoT as a corollary to the OT, right? So here we're talking about things we're a little bit more familiar with. So Still specialized devices, so kind of objects they have embedded sensors or specific processing ability or other technologies that essentially are connecting and then exchanging exchanging data with other devices over the internet or over some type of network. So they're less mission critical and more kind of mission accessories where they are providing insights or measurements of things going on for these critical systems, right? So on the less critical side, we're looking at CCTV, smart bulbs, smartwatches, etc. On the more critical side, for what we call the industrial IoT devices, you may have smart meters, wireless sensors, smart glasses, etc. They're all measuring parts of a process in motion. What we're seeing that's especially critical with IoT is the explosion of how pervasive these are being used in facilities and in previously only OT environments across the globe. So you can see there's some statistics on the history and kind of the projected future. Everything's becoming more connected. The lines are being blurred between the functions that these things are doing, and folks in OT environments are understanding now the capabilities that they can get by deploying these devices, things like operational efficiency, reduced downtime, better resource utilization, more granular measurement. So they're able to use these for a lot of new things, and they're realizing that some smaller calculated risks in deploying them are worth the trade-off. So let's talk about some challenges to securing these things, some additional challenges. So this is a video of how quickly things can go wrong in an OT environment. So I'm just going to let this play for a moment. We've got some sort of manufacturing facility. And we can see in an instant how fast this is spreading. You've got obviously, human life at stake here. We can see, a fire suppression system started to turn on, but didn't stand a chance. Right. So this is how quickly something like that can happen and how devastating it can be to a facility, to human life in the area. And that could be the result of just potentially tweaking a temperature a few degrees or opening a valve a bit more than it should be. So not a sophisticated or major adjustment to these types of devices can have catastrophic results. And so thinking about IT security and OT security, in the IT world, if you're familiar with the CIA triad, it's one of the kind of the staple concepts of IT security, which is confidentiality. Does anybody else know about this? Integrity, has it been changed at all? And availability, do I have access to the information? That's kind of the priority of CIA in the IT world. In the OT world, you actually flip that upside down and you add a letter. So you add safety at the top. In an OT environment, safety is paramount. If you're not talking about safety when you're talking about securing OT, whatever you're saying is probably going to fall on some pretty deaf ears. You have to be thinking safety in these environments. And then after safety, they actually care, is the information available? I can't have disruptions to that information getting where it needs to go. Integrity, has it been changed? Still important. And then confidentiality, I don't really care about confidentiality. As long as it's available and it hasn't been changed, I don't really care who knows about it. So where's the safety in IT? Typically safety isn't associated with IT. So we need to be thinking about that in these OT environments. Just like IT security, OT and IoT security has its own set of challenges, right? So as we've talked about, we've got specialized infrastructure systems and processes that they're running that can be pretty complex, not built with security in mind, so they don't have authentication. As we mentioned, no encryption, robustness, meaning they can't accept inputs that they're not expecting. And there's no such thing as, oh, we'll just patch it. Microsoft Patch Tuesday is not a thing in OT. So you can't make changes or update systems. we hear countless stories of Windows NT still running in environments because it's up, it's running, the process is working, so don't touch it. And then IoT has just absolutely expanded the attack surface. OT devices are becoming more connected, which has expanded as well. But that boom of implementation of IoT devices is really just making everything more connected. There's tons more data. So you've just got this ever growing and ever complex attack surface. That's on the technology side. On the people and process side, cyber attacks, they're becoming more sophisticated. They are becoming more targeted, but they're also still very easy to execute opportunistically, just by doing a little bit of research and seeing something that comes up that's connected to the internet. We're working with a cheese manufacturer here in the US, and cheese processing, they were the victims of a cyber attack a year or two ago. I don't know if many attackers are sitting around looking for juicy cheese manufacturing targets. It just happened to be something that was very opportunistic and had some severe impacts for them. As I mentioned, the lines are blurring. So OT devices are doing more. They're becoming more connected. They're interacting with IoT, and all together interacting with IT systems. So there's a lot of convergence and kind of blurring of the lines of functionality. And as always, there's limited resources, there's limited skill sets. So these are big challenges in OT as well. And that's where we're seeing a lot of folks, you've got to. It's not a question of build it or buy it anymore. Now it's what are the pieces we can kind of do ourselves, and how do we intelligently leverage partners like Stratagem to really augment what we're doing internally. There's very few organizations that are kind of keeping doing everything in-house these days. So I wanted to hit a couple trends that we're seeing over the last few years. So vulnerabilities, in years prior, years ago, maybe you'd see a few vulnerabilities released. We're not quite at IT levels yet, but we're seeing significant numbers of vulnerabilities being reported every year. And you can't even look at this chart and say, oh, well, okay, I'm not in manufacturing or energy, so I'm okay. I'm over in transportation systems. Well, 16 vulnerabilities across a vendor set that is widely used across many transportation systems can still be a big problem. So you can't ignore even even the smaller numbers of vulnerabilities being produced or being uncovered rather. What's less important about all the individual attacks here is all of the different industries, all the different types of attacks. We see malware, we see DDoS attacks, ransomware. We see the city of Dallas, wastewater systems. There's no one profile of attack type or organization type that we're seeing all of these attacks go for. They're becoming a lot more pervasive, a lot more widespread across industry verticals and across the different types of attacks. I think I've gotten through most of the bad news, right? These are critical systems. They're hard to secure, lots of challenges. On the good side, we're seeing more investment in products, in services, in guidance for OT. It's not something that folks can kind of just like not look at over in the corner anymore. Whether you're an IT team, IT security team that's now been made responsible for OT, whether you're an OT team that's now being tasked with securing these devices that you're using every day, we're seeing organizations understand that they need to put more resources and more investment towards protecting them. Automation, leveraging machine learning, artificial intelligence. So we're seeing some of these technologies be used to streamline, to make more efficient the efforts and the controls used to protect these systems. And we're also seeing a lot of attention from governments around the world, which is good for a number of reasons. One, getting national attention. A lot of grants and funding are being provided. Also, we're seeing more general cybersecurity guidance being put forth for these systems. So historically, if you're trying to secure these systems, you might be looking at maybe some regulations for a vertical, an industry vertical that's not really relevant to yours. There's some general ISO standards out there. Maybe you were, looking around and seeing what everybody else was doing. Maybe you're looking at some government standards for government systems, even though that wasn't relevant. And you were doing a lot of mapping and trying to figure out how to implement controls and practices to do that. But we're seeing, for instance, in the US, some guidelines being passed down, the cyber protection goals that break down across controls and practices, and are even giving things like cost and scope and impact to really provide better guidance around how to secure these systems. So, which is great because as we talked about in the trends, we're seeing more vulnerabilities. Healthcare, energy, manufacturing, big targets, but still there's no vertical that can kind of say like, hey, we're safe. And again, a variety of attacks here, both targeted and opportunistic. All right, so we've got things that are hard to secure. We've got lots of challenges. It's not going anywhere. What do we do about it? And that's where Nozomi comes in. So what essentially Nozomi is trying to do is help you secure all of visibility and security for all of your devices anywhere. So we want to be able to help you understand what's out there, what's going on, how they're communicating, their vulnerabilities, their threats, and how to protect them. And so what we're really trying to deliver is a set of operational outcomes, right? So we're trying to provide visibility as you grow and scale. So most companies, most organizations are going from very little or no visibility into these devices to, okay, now I've got accurate information about what I've got installed in my environment, deployed in my environment. I understand, the vulnerabilities, the patch levels, who they're communicating with, and now with that information, I'm positioned better to understand how to protect these things. Same thing on the risk reduction side. So, previously going from this large unknown with no monitoring to, hey, now I've got real-time 24/7 by 365 monitoring. I'm getting notified immediately as soon as something potentially malicious is going on, and I'm getting actionable insights so that I can take action rapidly to figure out what's going on and address it. As organizations are transforming and growing, so innovating and digitally transforming, again, you've got maybe multiple disparate types of environments. You've got legacy systems and legacy facilities. You've got, your facility of the future, your modern infrastructure, and you would have limited or no insight into, threats and behaviors across these different types of environments. Now we're helping provide comprehensive visibility. No matter how the organization transforms, and as you modernize, you're going to be covered and have that visibility and protection. And then as day-to-day operations, we're helping them become more efficient and more resilient, right? So before, from this kind of, again, unseen, unknown sense of risk to downtime and operator safety, now you've got improved resiliency and reliability because you're getting warned early. And it may not even be a cyber attack. It may just be a part wearing down. One of our customers is a very large organization that has a lot of theme parks, and they use us to monitor the brakes on their roller coasters, so they can see when the bearings are starting to wear down and replace those proactively. So there's a bit of predictive maintenance there as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a cyber attack. And so how do we do that? So we've got a set of features that we kind of bucketize across the visibility, the detection, and the response categories. So we're going to provide both at the endpoint on the network insight into vulnerabilities, into the asset details. On the detection side, we're looking for threats and anomalies, and essentially a timeline to help understand root cause analysis. And then on the response side, how do we, once we see something, how do we respond to it? And we've got some forensic tools, playbooks, intelligence, all incorporated, built into the solution to help you take action quickly and remediate. So who is Nozomi? So we're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. We were originally founded in Switzerland. We're headquartered globally out of San Francisco now, though. You can see there 12,000 plus installations across the globe. 105 million plus devices monitored. We've got our largest deployment is in the UAE, where we monitor several million devices total. I think it's around 3 million, but we've got one of our sensors monitoring a little bit over, I think like 1.3 million smart meters. One piece of equipment monitoring 1.3 million devices. So Nozomi can scale incredibly well. Our smallest deployment is, a single sensor sitting somewhere, monitoring maybe a couple hundred assets, up to again one sensor monitoring 1.3 million. So lots of other big deployments in the UAE, but around the globe as well. And also a worldwide network of partners. There are tons of folks that are trained on Nozomi to deploy, to monitor, to tune. So we have a small professional services team that's completely focused on deployment, but we leverage our partners, our strategic partners like Strategem for deployment assistance, for managed services assistance. So again, partners being the lifeblood of not only operating Nozomi, but to getting Nozomi into the hands of our customers. Where are we? Basically any industry vertical you can think of where there's OT, Nozomi's there. So we've got a lot of the the largest organizations in the world in verticals like utilities and oil and gas and mining, but we're really everywhere. We also play nice with everyone, is what I like to say on this slide. So lots of built-in technology integrations. We are protocol focused, so we don't have to be kind of compatible with a specific vendor. We work at the protocol level. So we understand all the major vendors. We're partners with a lot of the major vendors. We have relationships with almost all of them. And we're agnostic when it comes to who you're using for network switching or your network taps or your firewalls. So we play nice with everyone, and it's very easy to get the data out of our system as well. So, one of the goals of this webinar was to talk a little bit about innovation in this space, and what's less important than all of the the items on the timeline necessarily is, if you just take a glance, all the firsts that are highlighted in red in most of these. Nozomi has really seen itself as an innovator, as a leader in this space, to leading capabilities in the direction of what our customers need. We're not content to just kind of stay in the middle of the pack. We really have come out with a number of advancements, especially in the past few years. The first SaaS central management and kind of command center, SaaS-based. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first endpoint sensor and the first wireless sensor in the industry. So a little bit about the solution architecture. I'm not going to do a deep dive on all these for time's sake, but the kind of the core of our solution is the Guardian sensor there that you see kind of in the center of the screen in blue. So this is a network-based IDS sensor. It can be physical. We've got every size, shape, and form factor under the sun that you could need, or it can be virtualized, run on a VM in a container. So that is taking copies of traffic from a span port on a switch, from a network tap, and doing all of the analytics on the traffic on that sensor. Each sensor has its own full GUI, so you can interact with the sensor. The full suite of capabilities is there. Once you have multiple sensors deployed in a single site, in a campus, in multiple sites, you're going to probably want a single pane of glass to be able to see everything, to both manage the sensors and to, I call it kind of the command center, to take care of vulnerabilities, to do investigations from a central place. As I mentioned, we've got a number of integrations where if you want that information to go into your SIM, into your SOAR platform, whatever it is, to your partner that's providing managed services, very easy to get that there. So it lives in the Nozomi ecosystem as well as wherever it needs to get pushed. We have two options for that central command center. One is on-prem, which is our central management console, and then in the cloud is Vantage. So we host that in AWS. There's some additional capabilities that we can offer in Vantage because by nature of the scalable resources in the cloud. And there's some cool things that I'm going to kind of talk about in the next few slides and in the demo. But those are the two options. They can also work in tandem with each other. If you've got a site or a region or something that they just really like the CMC for some reason, we can feed all the sensors into the CMC, and then that can go up to Vantage. So it's highly scalable, highly flexible, and doesn't get needlessly complex as you scale out. It's really just how many Guardians do you need, and then where do you want kind of central points of aggregation. It's fed, the solution's fed by threat intel, which is all of our vulnerabilities. It is our indicators of compromise. So all that is in the threat intelligence feed. And then we've got a second feed called asset intelligence. So this is going to be information about the specific assets and vendors themselves that's going to provide additional context to behavior. So it's really information about how this device should be behaving, what inputs does it expect, what outputs should it be producing, what protocols should it be using, is it end of support or end of sale? So details that when you combine it with threat intelligence and the behavior piece, it really paints a very clear picture of what's going on with that device and whether or not it may be malicious and something that needs investigated. All of this is happening passively. We do have the feature Smart Polling, which lets you actively query devices that maybe they don't speak up on the network very often. Maybe they're behind a firewall that's obfuscating some of the attributes of that device, but you know it's there. You can speak to that device on its native protocol to be able to pull back information from it rapidly, so you don't have to wait over time to be able to see it. A few other pieces here that I'm not going to dive into, but I'm going to talk about a few additional ones on the next few slides. So one is Vantage IQ. So on top of our Vantage SaaS command center, IQ essentially looks at all of the deployed Nozomi sensors and takes kind of a strategic look at the results that they're generating. So it's, hey, I've got all this data and information across all of my sensors in Vantage. How do I generate strategic insights from that? So for instance, hey, of all of the alerts you've seen in your environment, you've never seen this type of alert before. Or, hey, most of your vulnerabilities are coming from this sensor at this site. It seems to be your most risky site. So, doing the tactical day-to-day, addressing alerts and vulnerabilities is certainly required. But Vantage IQ is basically like having a 24/7 strategic analyst full-time looking at all your data. So, one or two sensors deployed, there's some value there, but let's talk about 10, 15, 20, 50 sites across the globe, and you've got something, AI looking at it constantly for strategic insights and trends. That's where we really kind of ramp up exponentially the value to being able to prioritize and understand how to address what's going on in your environment. Our ARC endpoint sensor. It is an agent that goes on an endpoint, but it's called a sensor because in addition to, for Windows, Linux, and Mac, providing USB detection, user activity correlation, log analysis, and software and patch information, it will also sense any traffic that the system it's installed on is seeing. ARC analyzes and pushes that to a Guardian or to Vantage. So essentially, you've got multiple options to getting the visibility you need. So maybe you've got a small network segment that just has a few systems there. Well, instead of deploying a full sensor, you can deploy ARC on the endpoint to not only get detailed visibility into the endpoint itself, but let that kind of help map and track over time based on the network traffic, the trends and the behaviors of that network segment. So you may have Guardian deployed at the network level, but as you can see, the ARC sensor deployed on strategic workstations around that to all feed into, again, comprehensive visibility. And Guardian Air. So I mentioned Guardian, our sensor, is really kind of the core of the solution. Up until this year, that's all been wired sensors. We've released the industry's first wireless sensor that's going to detect across multiple spectrums and technologies to be able to do asset identification, asset tagging, threat detection. So in these, as we're seeing more IoT, more connected devices, you're seeing these technologies more and more in OT environments. So again, the attack surface is expanding. We're seeing more of these devices out there. So wireless was the next step in that evolution. So Nozomi is introducing that this year as an industry first. One of the really cool capabilities also is triangulation. So if you've got several of our wireless sensors deployed, it can actually triangulate where a rogue device potentially is in a facility. So a lot of really cool capabilities coming with that. So what does it all look like when it comes together? So maybe you've got multiple sites here on the right-hand side, some Guardian Air sensors monitoring the whole environment. We've got the devices wired, sending their traffic to a Guardian, and that's going up to Vantage. The IoT site below it, we've got everything feeding Guardian from the wired side. We've got some ARC sensors deployed. Our remote collector is a small traffic store and forward device, pushing traffic to Guardian for analysis. And that Guardian's flowing to a CMC and then up to Vantage. So again, the flexibility of the architecture. All processing is done on the Guardian. So we're not pushing traffic up to the cloud. That's all, if you're going to the cloud, it's just all metadata. So it's just all metadata going to the CMC and Vantage. So there's really no meaningful impact to the network either. So we're not introducing risk to the network. So I'm going to jump into a demo. I just wanted to standardize on a few terms before I show off a few features. So one is assets and nodes. So assets compared to nodes. So in Nozomi speak, a node is any unique MAC or IP address on a network. Once we determine that that node is not public, is communicating bidirectionally, and is not just broadcast, we say, hey, this is an asset that lives on your network. This is something you want to monitor over time, something you own. And so it gets promoted to be an asset. The links are the communications links between any two nodes. So, every asset is a node, but not every node is an asset. There can also be a one-to-many relationship between assets and nodes. So if you've got let's say a Windows PC out there that's got 2 network cards in it, so it's dual homed, it sits on 2 networks, that would be one asset correlating to 2 nodes. Protocols are simply the protocols being used on those links. Sessions are the individual communication sessions on those links. And variables. So variables are process data that are sent to these OT devices that tells them how to behave. So tracking these things over time is crucial, and is a result of the deep packet inspection that we can do for all of the network traffic to understand when these things may be changing more rapidly than we've observed before. Maybe they're changing slower or going out of a range that we have previously observed. That can be catastrophic. And there's, these environments typically have no single pane of glass, no means to look at all of these across all of their vendors in one place and also be alerted when they're seeing deviations from what they've seen before. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and switch screens here into my demo environment. And we'll take a look at, we're going to jump into our Vantage platform to take a look at a few things and capabilities that I had been speaking about. All right, so we'll bring this back up. We're going to jump to here. Oh, wrong browser. Safari, there we go. All right, there we go. So, so this is our Vantage interface. So this is the main landing page now. I'm going to show off a few dashboards. We're in the process of letting you customize what kind of dashboard you want to land on. Really the goal that Nozomi has forward-looking is previously, working in these environments required you to jump down to the sensors quite frequently to do the deep stage analysis. Everything was bubbling up to the command center, but when you really wanted to dig through everything, you had to jump down to the sensor. So more and more, the feature parity is moving to Vantage. We really want most folks living in Vantage day to day if they're using our, our interface. Again, if you're using your sim to just look for alerts and then jumping in here, that's fine. But for folks that do want to live in the Nozomi world, Vantage is going to be where you're going to want to live. So we can see here a few bits of information about my environment. We see some Vantage IQ, some interesting things with Vantage IQ. I'm going to hold off on jumping into that though, and show you kind of what happens essentially immediately as you start plugging Nozomi sensors in, and that is we start mapping everything we see. So all of the assets, all of the communications. One way I like to group this is by zone. So we're going to automatically detect all the subnets and everything in the environment, and you can name those, and it makes for a really nice graphical picture to understand what zones I have out there, and are they communicating to each other? Should they be allowed to be communicating to each other? So we can see here, I've got a couple production networks. I've got my DMZ, I've got a CCTV network, I've got a building automation network, some smart scanners, some smart devices, my VoIP network. So a really clear picture of what's going on, the types of devices that are there. I've got my legend for any of my views that are going to tell me the types of devices that I have, and all of these are clickable. So if I click on one of them, right, I'm going to get a nice picture. I'm going to get some summary details about them. And if I jump into the full details, I've got a smattering of information here. So I can see that this is a Schneider Modicon piece of equipment. I can see it's running firmware version 2.9. I can see it's using the Modbus as a communications. I can see that down here in the graph as well as a communication protocol. It sits in my production network A. So a lot of different information about these devices. It's got several links that weren't, none of them active right now. Sessions on those links. On the variable side, again, I can see variable values here that if I track them over time, I can understand if they're going out of range and get alerted that something is changing that I should be aware of. Let's see, no vulnerabilities for this guy. I'm going to jump to actually two things. One, to my assets page, which shows me all of my assets that I'm seeing. And so for instance, if I wanted to check, what all my Schneider gear was running across, if I had multiple sites here, multiple sensors, in one click, I could see all the versions of firmware that all of my Schneider boxes are running. All right, I'm gonna jump to my favorite PLC 176. No vulnerabilities for this guy. Okay, so we'll pop into vulnerabilities on one of the other ones to see. But the point is, the day one value from Nozomi is you're immediately protected. We're going to find vulnerabilities, and so that happens as a 24/7 process. You don't have to scan for anything. That's happening in the background at all times. As soon as we identify enough information about the PLC or about the equipment, we're going to cross-reference that with our vulnerability database, so you get consistent updates on relevant vulnerabilities for the environment. You're also protected across all of our threat intelligence signatures. So again, from day one, the second you plug us in, if we see something that's a known threat, we're going to alert on that. What you do, what takes anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, is the anomaly detection. So we need to have some time to baseline the environment, see what normal looks like, and then once we flip the switch into what we call protecting mode, which just means now I'm going to alert you if there are any anomalies, deviations from the behavior we've observed, then you're going to have that anomaly detection as well. And that's how we're going to detect things like 0 days and complex attacks that there may not be signatures for. The network graph, so we've got lots of assets. I can see here, I've got lots of alerts, which is fine, but I want to take a look at it and understand, okay, if I've got tons of sensors out there with all these alerts, all these vulnerabilities, all this activity, what are really the trends that I should be looking at, right? So, and just to look at a couple of these, here, unusual high risk alert. So receiving a high-risk alert regarding generic IPs is unusual within our network. So we've never really seen that before. So that's something maybe I should prioritize. Likely and confirmed vulnerabilities affecting the IO modules. So a particular type of equipment that may be generating a significant amount of vulnerabilities in my network. Hey, my most risky zone. Most of my high-risk security threats are being generated by the production network B zone. So again, these are strategic level insights that might not necessarily be immediately obvious as you're doing the day-to-day. And here's where you can deploy some more strategic remediations or controls to be able to help take care of those. The last piece I wanted to show is queries. So rather than having to learn a whole new query language, which you have access to the entire set of Nozomi databases to use for querying to see different types of data. You can use it for dashboard widgets, for report widgets. We've added this AI IQ assistant. So now we can just start typing or even speaking. We've even got the microphone here that if you wanted to speak, you can start to ask it questions. Let's see, all my open alerts, right? It's going to give you the query, but then give you the results as well. So it's we've drastically shortcutted and streamlined folks' ability to kind of leverage the full data set within Nozomi. Folks always like to see things sliced and diced a certain way. So we've added that, made that capability much easier than having to learn a query language from scratch here. And on that, on the dashboard front, for instance, let's see, let's look at some alert metrics. So these are all query based, but we've got lots of different visualizations and customizations. Dashboards are super easy to make and customize. But if you are somebody that's really just concerned about alerts every day and you want to see your alert dashboard as you pop in here, we've got various ways of looking at more recent alerts, trends, high risk zones with the highest risk score, timelines of alerts, all different kinds of things, ways to kind of dive into analyzing these, taking a look at them by various types of criteria associated with those. Lots of different ways to dig into the data here. So we're really leaning into Vantage as being kind of the one-stop shop to really work with, understand, and take action on everything that's going on in your environment. So with that, again, I'm going to switch back to our presentation. For Nasreen to jump on and help close us out here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. That was a very impactful presentation, and I found it quite impressed by the use case you talked about there. 1.3 million smart meters being monitored by one single device over in the UAE. Really impressive scalability there, robustness, and that's great. So as part of closing out here today, of course, we are a partner of Nozomi Networks, and as Jim was saying, the real magic happens when you can really utilize the data, put it into a real use case, automate it, get it into a kind of state where you can use the data for actionable intelligence. And so that's exactly what we do. When we bring a customer on board with Nozomi Networks, we are assisting with the likes of automating OT security, working collaboratively with our expert team to action findings, and also assisting with reporting and actionable intelligence guided by Stratagem. So if anybody on the call today is interested in further inquiring about what that really would look like, please reach out to me personally. I know I have a few potential Stratagem customers who are looking to extend their visibility into the OT space. So I'm really happy that to see them here today, and if there's any additional insights they do require, we can always go back. So with that being said, I want to open up the floor to a live Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. But I do have a few questions here that came through, Jim, on the other side. So one of the first questions was, what are some of the biggest challenges that someone would face when implementing Nozomi networks?
Yeah, sure. That's a good first question to lead off with, because often we find, organizations coming to us a number of challenges. One is, right, one of the whole use cases for Nozomi is helping people understand what they have out there. How many assets, what kind of assets. So, when we say, hey, do you have an idea of, how many assets you have at these facilities? And they say, we don't know. It could be 100, it could be 500. They're usually they can tell us whether it's, closer to 100 or closer to 10,000, but in a lot of cases they just don't know. So one of the biggest challenges initially is just understanding how to phase something like this, and that's where we'll work with them. Partners like you at Stratagem will help them kind of figure out a crawl, walk, run approach where we're maybe doing either a critical plant or a more modern plant, or a smaller or a larger plant, something that's going to help give us an idea of what we're working with, and then really kind of technologically and from a business standpoint, what makes the most sense that's in alignment with with their both cybersecurity and their business goals to help figure out how to deploy. The other thing is operationalizing everything. You've got, whether it's the IT security team, whether it's the OT team, luckily now we're seeing them work together a lot better. All this data is great, these alerts are great, but it's like, okay, now what do we do with this stuff, right? It's a team of two over in the corner, right? It's Joe and Lisa, and they're responsible for OT security. And so as I mentioned before, we're seeing less like, hey, we're going to do all of this in-house, to more, how do we leverage partners strategically to help us do this? So we're seeing a lot of organizations go the route of leveraging a partner like Stratagem for kind of the first layer of managed monitoring and response, and then working with the in-house teams to address it when something comes up. So partners are playing a critical role. The technology piece, especially for Nozomi, we're about as close to zero maintenance and plug and play as you'll get, I guarantee, with any piece of technology in OT, in IT, personal business, anywhere. That's something I'll stand tall on. The technology piece is often very easy. Getting the organization in line, getting the architecture planned out, that's a challenge as well occasionally. But again, something that Nozomi is more than well versed to help with, as well as partners like yourselves.
Well, that's fantastic. A very similar narrative I see replicated really in threat intelligence. So one of our customer engages in buying a threat intel feed. They have a mass amount of data in front of them, but then they don't know really how to parse that or really what to do with. So it's basically a useless pile of data until it's optimized. And it can be overwhelming, which is what we do. We come in and say, you know what, fantastic, we have all these insights. Let us orchestrate this into actionable intelligence for you, which is really what it's all about. And I guess the last question here I have for you, Jim, is what would you say are a few quick wins that a customer could take advantage of day one with deploying Nozomi?
Yeah, sure. That's another good kind of the opposite of the challenges, right? Like, okay, I got this thing. Like, how am I going to show value, or what are going to be my immediate benefits? One is, like I showed, is the visibility is immediate. As soon as you plug us in, we're seeing things, and over time, we're just going to get more detailed. So if asset inventory is one of your use cases, which 99.9% folks care about asset inventory, you're getting that from day one. You're getting an understanding of malicious threats, in the environment from day one as well. So it's not something where you've got to deploy and tune and baseline, and it's several months in before you're seeing value. It's there's day one value with this. So that's kind of the most obvious, as well as if you're using this to kind of justify, a more expansive deployment. If you're using it to highlight the use case of OT security, right? We're going to give you everything you need to build that case to kind of get the organization on board. And the other thing is there's something for everyone in Nozomi. So cybersecurity is a no-brainer, but also network troubleshooting.
Mhm.
The operational folks love when they get access to be able to see, again, those variables over time, to get alerted for things that are relevant to them, and also have a common platform for everybody to kind of jump into before the finger pointing starts, before somebody's driving to a site. You've got all that visibility in one place and in a common data set. So we're seeing that kind of the more folks you get involved with using the platform, the better. And that's an easy thing to get started from day one.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jim. If we could just go to the last slide. In closing here, one of the biggest wins here at Stratum has always been traditionally that we've been really good at picking top technology, and it's no surprise that we pick Nozomi Networks to partner with. They are among the best in breed in the OT security space, and so I think that speaks to something or testifies to something that we have chosen Nozomi Networks as our primary partner. So if there are any additional questions, please do reach out to me. There is my email, nisreen.chams@stratagem.com. Please do connect with us on LinkedIn as well. We share constantly new events, new campaigns that we're running at Stratagem. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for their time this afternoon, and thank you again, Jim, for your valuable insights. Putting together, let's say, 10,000 hours into 60 minutes is always valuable for us. So thank you so much. With that being said, have a great afternoon, everyone. Take care.
Yep. Take care. Thanks, everybody.